encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network.
You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
And here's Daniel, Alan, and Joe.
Okay, Joe and Daniel, we've kind of evolved a little bit from Soul Training Matters because all souls matter to we kind of like to be known as the People's Podcast.
Yeah, we're for the people.
We're for the people. It's we don't want to get sued by the company that uses that mantra, but they're for the people, and we are too.
The law firm.
The law firm, yes, they understand the legal system, and we do not. But I do like their little mantra. So tonight we're going to talk about confrontation or conflict, rather. How do you deal or respond to conflict, or how do you deal with maybe that's also weaved into confrontation, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
Or criticism. How do we deal
was
with
talking about criticism.
I knew it had a C in it somewhere. Yeah, criticism. We're going to talk about criticism. Yeah, how do we deal and respond to critics and criticisms, and then that kind of maybe leads to confrontation, but also how we respond when someone wants to maybe criticize us, and we can respond in the way that James would have us to. We want to read about in some other areas. So that's kind of the crux of the matter is how do we respond to criticism. That's
true, but you're not going to mention the elephant. I shouldn't say elephant. You're not going to mention the people in the room. This is our first ever live soul training. Alan's completely forgot we've got a room full of people here watching.
Well, they're all my friends and family. It's like being in the living room. It's kind of normal.
That's right.
It's comforting to look out and see all these beautiful people.
And so we've had the opportunity here to do a broadcast in front of a live studio audience. We'll see how this goes, but hopefully our topic doesn't come back to bite us.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well we thought out the idea of doing a topic on criticism with our first live studio audience, and we're going to give them a chance for Q&A afterwards. So we're literally asking for criticism here.
For what it's worth, I do have a mute button, so if there is some criticism that we don't want to take, we don't have to take that. We don't have to take that from anybody. Okay.
So Joe, how do you deal with criticism? I'll start with you. We'll start with you and then Daniel.
You guys get criticism? I mean,
see? There's part of the problem. He doesn't get any criticism. So we know how this works. Then.
No, I think whenever I get criticism, you first have to kind of consider the source. Is it someone that I have some trust in what they're saying, someone I respect? Because I don't know how you guys think, but if somebody that's okay, this hasn't happened to me, but if somebody calls me a jerk every day, all my life, and then they criticize me on something, I'm probably not going to listen to anything they say. But if it's somebody I love and respect, and they say, listen, I think you could do something to help you in this aspect of your life or work, well, then I'm going to take that a little more to heart. What about you?
But how do you respond, whether it's somebody who has credibility or somebody that you trust or someone who is, you don't feel they demonstrate any credibility, but how are you going to react to them when they call you a name or call you out in front of people?
Well, I'm thinking of criticism like they don't like the way I do public speaking, And so if someone that I did not respect commented on my public speaking ability, I might think about it for a minute, but I'm not going to be as likely to take their advice, I suppose. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, you'll take a little of it though, right?
Maybe. It depends. If they tell me you stink, sit down, no. It just depends on what it is. What about you? Daniel, you haven't spoken at all. How do you handle it? You never get criticized either.
I get loads of criticism. It's a great blessing in my life.
Blessing.
No, and I say that in jest, but I think one of the things we hope to do with this discussion tonight is kind of reframe how we look at the topic of criticism and try to think of it as a blessing. Try to think of it as something to invite, even to to see the benefits of it. And you're talking about how we respond to criticism. The Bible says a lot about that, especially through the book of Proverbs. For example, in Proverbs chapter 9, verses 7 through 9, it says, "He who corrects a scoffer gets dishonor for himself. He who reproves a wicked man gets insults for himself. Do not reprove a scoffer, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase his learning." So how do I respond to criticism? Do I hate the critic? Do I give insults back to him? Well, that's what a fool does, according to Proverbs. And so I don't want to be a fool. What the wise man does when he gets criticism is, he's going to accept it, evaluate it, do some of the other things that we'll talk about as we discuss how to properly deal with that criticism.
Hey, Alan, don't you have a story about asking for some constructive criticism one time on note cards?
Yeah, I have two stories actually.
Have we told this to the people?
They probably forgot it if we have.
We'll
But
do it.
I know
You
you'd
gotta
like.
tell it.
I know you'd like to hear it again.
I would love to hear
But
it.
I had two stories. Once I made $200 a day, and I thought I was wealthy. I went one day a year. That's one day a year. I went invited to a conference. I went 5 summers in a row. I went to Louisville one summer, went to Lexington the next summer. They gave me $200 to come speak at the Galt House in one place somewhere in Lexington, and they couldn't find anybody else to do it. So that's how I ended up with it. But I thought they paid mileage. I made, by the time it was taxed, I got $80. I think out of that 200 probably. But I would go and I would do a presentation. And one day I had a really bright idea, which ended up not being very bright. And I came up with these surveys. I thought, these people like me, don't they? I bet they do. So at the end of our first break, when our session was over, I said, if you'll just complete this survey, I'm going to wait in the lobby, okay? Just leave these surveys on your seats, and I'll come back and get them, okay? And they were all eager to do this, and I thought, well, they must really like me because they're all nodding their head. And I went, and they all came out, and I jumped the cake table to try to find all my surveys and collect them all, and they were not positive. I could tell how hard they had written in the paper, and they called. There was some name calling, nothing real ugly, but it was kind of more monikers they hung on me. I was in Louisville and Lexington, big place to me. And I'm from Southern Kentucky, and they thought I was hard to understand. They thought I was too country. They thought all of those things. And I took it personal. I kept those like an indictment in a box under my bed for years, and I would get those out and review those. And I took it personal. But they were being critical, but it helped me grow. But it also helped me do this, to learn never to do that again. So I never did that again. I never passed out surveys again. So I did learn from it. So
Well, you learned something. That's good.
I learned a lot. I thought they didn't like me, but
Daniel, we have
I will say that something I have learned about dealing with critics. The older I get, I can't hear as well as I used to. That's helped me. That's helped me deal with
so
critics
you just
too.
keep on walking.
I can't hear like I used to. So that's helped a lot. Some of it's selective, but
So, as kind of as our custom, we've passed around articles. Daniel he has preached a sermon on everything. He's got a catalog, and so if we could dive into a little of what your notes are, Daniel, just going down the list here. Will you kick us off on like maybe biblical characters and how they've dealt with criticism?
Sure. I mean, if you've been criticized, you're in some pretty good company, because there are a lot of some of the best people that have ever lived, literally, have experienced significant criticism. You can talk about Moses, for example, one of the greatest leaders of history. He's somebody that I think anybody would look up to, yet Moses experienced all kinds of criticism. He's sent on a mission by God to go and approach Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh that he ought to let the people go, and Pharaoh doesn't like the idea, doesn't really appreciate the suggestion, and so he makes things harder for the Israelites for a while there. And in Exodus chapter 5, verse 21, the Israelites are complaining against Moses already. They say that you've made a stink in Pharaoh's sight. That's not very complimentary of this new leader for the Israelites. And then a little while later, after he does succeed in getting Pharaoh to let the people go, with God's help, they get out into the wilderness, and they start criticizing him again. In Exodus chapter 14, verse 11, they say to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness?" Again, when they're trying to go into the promised land.
How frustrating
right.
would that be? I mean, you're
Over and
literally
over.
being led around by God.
Yes.
And they can see that.
Mhm.
But still, like, Moses, what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
How frustrating.
He's
I mean,
doing
he must have been
everything for him.
Yeah, he's a tough dude.
He
Never
is.
deal with that.
Right. That's tough. He's a great leader, but receives tons of criticism. You got the Apostle Paul in the book of 2 Corinthians. They say, Paul, an apostle, great apostle, world's greatest missionary, inspiration to gospel preachers everywhere throughout time, did a world of good. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 10, he records that they're saying about him that his letters are weighty and strong, but his personal presence is unimpressive and his speech is contemptible. In other words, they say he's ugly and he can't preach.
I've heard that before.
You heard that criticism too?
Yeah, I've heard that. I hear that my hearing's real good on that. I can hear that before.
Well, maybe you're the next Paul.
That's true.
Got to take courage in
Paul apparently took up writing after that.
Paul
He was
took a lot
really good at that,
Took a
yeah.
lot of beatings too.
Yeah,
He
That's
did.
right. I
Took a lot
understand
of
that
beatings.
too.
Or what about Jesus? How many mistakes did Jesus make? Not a single mistake. Not a single mistake. Yet, how much criticism did he receive? Some pretty harsh criticism. In Mark chapter 3, verse 22, they're calling him possessed by Beelzebul. In John 10, verse 20, they say he has a demon, he's insane. In Mark chapter 3, verse 20 and 21, it says his own people heard about this. They lay hold of him and say he's out of his mind. So here, the old sermon, I think probably every preacher has some obligation to preach at some point in time, the Lord, liar, and lunatic thing, where if you take Jesus at his word, the way he is presented in the Bible, you have to admit he's either Lord, or he's a liar, or he's a lunatic. Well, that's not new. They were already calling him crazy. Some people were. Yeah. And that's... If Jesus was experiencing that type of criticism, then we're not going to escape criticism, which is probably a good thing anyway. If we don't ever experience any sort of criticism, then probably means we're not ever doing anything that is significant enough to get the adversary's attention.
Yeah, I have had. I was kidding with you guys earlier. Believe it or not, I have had criticism. Actually,
I still don't believe it.
You don't believe it? Well, it's been a while. No,
Yeah, I'm sure.
I do have criticism, and it seems to be frequent.
Just hard to remember, isn't it?
No,
This
I
is-
remember. I'm trying. So when it happens, though, like I said earlier, sometimes you have to just let it slide off your back. You've got to be able to. Do you think Jesus was bothered by them saying he's insane, or do you think he's like, well, yeah, but y'all don't know what you're talking about?
Well, he knew it wasn't true, obviously. So
Right.
he's not taking that criticism to heart and saying, I wonder if I am insane. I don't think that happened one time. But I bet it did bother him in terms of, I do want to reach these people, and I don't like that that's how they're responding. So I don't know.
A lot
I
of the
guess-
ones doing this to him are the Pharisees, though, and they kind of butted heads anyhow.
Mhm.
And so that kind of goes back to like my first point with you guys is, if somebody calls me a jerk every day, I'm going to be less likely to take his criticism, right? And then, to my knowledge, nobody does that. There might be somebody out there.
Well, that goes to the point of evaluating the criticism and its legitimacy. If it doesn't have any legitimacy to it, then you gotta let that go. Proverbs 26 verse 2 says, "Like a sparrow in its flitting, like a swallow in its flying, so a curse without cause does not alight." And so, if I'm confident in what I'm doing, then why should I get upset about unfair criticism? One time, my very first work preaching, I literally was still finishing college. It was my last semester of college, but I already started a full-time preaching job. And one time there was a lady, a visitor, that came up to me afterwards one Sunday and said, "Aren't you a little young to be preaching?" And yeah, what I wanted to say back, I wanted to say, well, aren't you a little old to be doing whatever you're doing? What do you mean?
I'm going to write that down. That's pretty good.
I didn't say that. I think I said something to the effect of, well, I'm getting older as fast as I can. But, and in retrospect, yeah, I was really young, but you got to start somewhere, right? But that's not the kind of criticism that, what are you supposed to do with that criticism?
Right.
Yeah.
One of our dear listeners sent me a text that referenced Luke 6, verse 26.
Is that the one that went off in our microphone a second ago?
No, that was my daytime boss, by the way. That's about a bus route tomorrow. Sorry. Sorry about that. Woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets. So, that came in. I just picked up my phone a few minutes ago, but Jesus wasn't bothered. It's to Daniel's point. I mean, he's probably more disappointed that people were reacting in the way they did because he wanted to reach them. But it's not news to him. It's not news. And he's not shocked but disappointed only because he loves people.
You're right.
Well, you asked him a question about character. Can I throw one out? What about if you go to 2 Samuel chapter 12, or 2 Samuel chapter 12, where Nathan confronts or criticizes David? I think would be a good example. I mean, we won't read all of that, but I mean, how does David respond?
Well, give us the Cliff Notes version right fast.
Well,
so the people know what you're talking about.
We're blessed to having very intelligent people.
Well, not these people. All the people that have yet to hear
I keep
this.
forgetting that our audience is broader.
These microphones record.
But we know that, with the characters of David, Bathsheba, and Uriah, we know that David committed adultery, and that was the first step to spiraling out of control of eventually setting up Uriah's murder, and then having a child with Bathsheba. And then the prophet Nathan comes to criticize or confront David, which I think takes a ton of courage, because
he's a king.
You're talking about King David. He could have him exiled, disposed of in the moment. But yet he continues to have this conversation, sets up Nathan's parable, and David's confession. And even in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 7, then Nathan said to David, "You are the man," at the end of setting up the whole scenario of his parable and highlighting that David had committed wrong. David had committed not only adultery, but murder and fornication, and the list goes on and on and on. But in verse 9 of 2 Samuel chapter 12, "Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife." Then in verse 11, "Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes, and give them to your neighbors, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun." So David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die." So we see how David responds to the criticism is he accepts responsibility, has awareness, but also moves from confrontation because of criticism, but he also moves towards acceptance of responsibility, which is a way for us to learn that how can we respond to correction. We also need to realize that there is a solution available when somebody, you mentioned the extreme of somebody name calling you every day. Mm-hmm. But if someone is actually coming to us like Nathan does to David, then there's a reason, because there's a concern, and also because there's a care as well. So,
yeah. And this seems to have hit David. It doesn't really spell it out there, but I can imagine it hit him like a ton of bricks. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my goodness, you're right.
Yeah.
It took a minute. I mean, it took, it had to go on a little journey before that would happen.
And I'm glad you brought up that story from David, because that really illustrates well how to receive criticism. And we've kind of been talking some about disregarding unfair criticism and not getting hung up on those things. But we want to circle back around to that idea of, we want to actually seek it out and accept it and learn to love criticism. Proverbs 15, verse 31 and 33 says, "He whose ear listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. He who neglects discipline despises himself, but he who listens to reproof acquires understanding." We're taught to pray for wisdom, and one of the ways that God is going to give us wisdom is by allowing others to participate in that process. Sometimes through that feedback, constructive or otherwise, there can be some truth that can help us. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 1 says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid." That's pretty plain, right? Charles Spurgeon said one time that you ought to get a friend who will reveal your faults, or better still, welcome an enemy who will watch you keenly and sting you savagely. What a blessing such an irritating critic would be to a wise man, and what an intolerable nuisance to a fool. I mean, you imagine having that attitude that you want to seek out somebody that is going to nitpick you, is going to criticize you, because they're going to give you perspectives about yourself that you're not going to get otherwise.
Hey, Alan, going back to your story of your note cards and your criticism, was there anything helpful in there? I mean, did you take away anything? I know a bunch of it was not helpful, but was there anything in there that you took away with you that?
Well, the tears on those cards, they stayed for a long time. I know that. Barney Fife says the tears on my pillow bespeak the pain in my heart, and I could probably say the tears on those cards bespoke this pain in my heart.
Is what you're saying.
Yes, it was. I needed it. I just wish that the tact could have been used a little bit, but it helped me. It helped me to try to focus. To get up, speak up, and shut up, that kind of thing. And it's hard to do. And I was much, much younger, and I had to realize my audience, and it helped me improve and get better. And I learned that I remember one time I went up there, I was so proud of our garden at home. I talked about how we'd planted a garden and we were harvesting tomatoes, and I was going to have, a tomato and bologna sandwich that night. And I shouldn't have taken 10 minutes to talk to those people about that. But I was much younger, so it helped me kind of tighten up my presentation a little bit. But, yeah, I learned a whole lot. I really did. But it was a good experience, but, I probably wouldn't do it again. Maybe, I don't know.
And there's something to be said. It was note cards, right, that you left?
No, I left them with a survey. I did a presentation.
Did they have to put their name on the survey, or was it anonymous?
No, I thought I was helping them out. I said, you don't have to put your name on it, but some did anyway.
And so,
because they wanted to know where it came from, I think.
I just wonder, in today's age of social media, anybody that spent 30 seconds on there realizes there's some keyboard warriors that do things more or less anonymously. Mm-hmm. In the story you just talked about with David, that was someone he knew and trusted and was close to him.
Yeah, it's easy to say something, about somebody behind a keyboard or in a text, but most of the time you won't say something to somebody looking them in the eye. Most of the time, right. I mean, it'll be different.
So what about this, Daniel? Alan, we've been talking about what happens when someone criticizes us. Is this now? And I hesitate to say this in front of a studio audience.
They love us.
Should we criticize? Should we be looking to criticize others? I mean, or is criticism? Maybe that's a word in English that we might take one way. That sounds kind of bad.
I think you got to look at your motivation,
right? Yeah.
Why are you doing it?
So what do we do with this? What's the takeaway with this?
So if you're doing it from a loving motivation, like Alan was alluding to there, somebody once said that. What we need is constructive criticism, right? Constructive criticism is when I criticize you, and destructive criticism is when you criticize me. That's how that works. But what are we trying to do when we criticize? Are we trying to help a friend? Are we trying to give them something that sincerely they need to hear, we think? Or are we just trying to tear them down, build ourselves up? What's the motive there? And I'm glad you mentioned also the the anonymous aspect of it. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 5 and 6 says, "Better is open rebuke than love that is concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy." A friend is going to try to bring out the best of us, and you need that person in your life that is authorized to tell you hard things that you need to hear, and to do so in a way that they have your best interest at heart. And a lot of us, we don't want to hear that, so we kind of make it clear criticism is not really welcome. But that's, I think, ultimately to our detriment if we don't want to hear the criticism. But again, the value there is in open rebuke. And so I have a problem with anonymous criticism. And I think if you're, one, you ought to make yourself available to be criticized, invite it. But two, it needs to have a name on it. Anonymous criticism isn't worth anything. That needs to go straight in the trash can.
And I think it has to be real. I mean, I've worked for people in my day job that in order to they have to find something, and I don't really appreciate that. Well, I've got to find something. I've got to put something down on here that's negative. I've got to at least find something. And I've had them like, I mean, it wasn't real hard work to put down something negative, but I mean, it just felt like it was almost nitpicking just to check a box.
You talking about like performance? What are you talking about?
Yeah, maybe I took 10 extra minutes at lunch one day or something like that, and just to put something down, just to document something negative. Now that's a little, that's not constructive criticism. That's
right.
Being an opportunist as an evaluator, I think.
I think too how you deal with that kind of third party criticism and protect anonymity can be a negative, and can be a way that people hide their own opinion. I might go to Alan and say, Alan, people are saying this about you, and when people actually is me,
Yeah. And I'm probably going to say, is it one they or many days?
Or many days, yeah. So who is it?
Or I'm probably going to say, if you can't put a name on it,
right.
I can't deal in rumors.
It's much more helpful for me to be able to go and say, Alan, this brother actually has a problem with you. Maybe you need to work on your relationship with him. I'll tell you who it is. Mm-hmm. And then there's something you can
I'll take action.
Take action with, yeah.
Okay, well, we're getting to that point of the show.
Remember Phil Donahue?
Yeah.
Do you remember how Phil would take the mic and he'd run up and down the aisles? You have a Phil Donahue?
Like, I didn't watch daytime television whenever Phil Donahue was on.
Really? It was
you're
great.
A little older than I am. A little.
How much little? Your fingers was spread pretty wide open. That's a lot little. That's not a little. That's a lot little.
I remember the guy, okay.
Oh,
I don't remember anybody running anywhere, but I remember the guy.
So what are we doing here? Are we closing it out and doing a separate Q&A, or is the Q&A part of it?
I think we just tag it on right now. Now, here's the interesting part of this. We just did a show on criticism. Now I'm going to hand the microphone to the audience and hope for the best.
We do have doors like right behind us.
We do. If we need to make a speedy escape, we can. Does anybody have... Okay. I didn't even spit the phrase out.
Yeah. We're gonna find out how much they love us.
All right. Now, my advice would be is not to stand directly under that speaker. Okay.
So, dear listener, the reason we all laughed is because one of our dear listeners in person very eagerly raised his hand immediately when he had the chance. So he was ready.
He wasn't the only one either.
He wasn't the only one either. That's right.
And so, we'll let you guys. This is your time. You ask a question. Criticize Daniel and Alan, whatever you want to do.
I got Daniel on. Is that on?
That's on. You got to get it kind of close to you.
Okay.
There you go.
I told Daniel earlier when I asked him what was the topic, and he said criticism, and I said, "Oh, can I criticize you on this?" So he laughed. He thought it was funny, but I wanted to. What I thought of when you mentioned that, Daniel, was Mark 12, starting about verse 18, when the Sadducees came to Christ and challenged him about the resurrection and asked him a question about something that Moses had commanded the Jewish people to do, and that's when a man dies and leaves his widow, that his brother takes her as a wife to raise, and that happened with 7 men. and they all had her. And so they were challenging Christ because the Sadducees, even though they were rulers of the Jewish people, they did not believe in the resurrection or angels or spirits. And so, but I find it interesting in the terms of criticism of what Christ's response was, starting in about verse 24. Jesus said to them, "Is this not the reason you are wrong? Because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, how God just spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong." So Christ, in this case, in this example, and we have no idea what his tone of voice was. I mean, because the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and a whole lot of the things that were going on against him, the criticism against him, made him angry because they weren't listening. But in this case, he was teaching a lesson, a strong lesson in response to something that they were challenging him on a very critical manner for them. You know, and yet he taught them a lesson and us a lesson at the same time. So criticism can be positive. Yeah, I agree. There's not such a thing as constructive criticism. It's criticism, nevertheless. And how we take it is the thing that has to be done correctly. And we sometimes have to consider the source. But here Christ is being very critical of the Sadducees, calling them dumb. They don't know the power of God. They don't know the word. They don't know what they profess to live by. And yet, he's very critical.
Very good. Well, thank you, first of all, for not criticizing us. That was the first good go-around. Who's next? I saw hands. Oh, okay. You're going to need this. It's a man that needs no introduction.
Frequent soul training guest.
I've got a two-part thing here. First of all, we're all on the edge of our seats because earlier, Alan, you said you had 2 criticism stories and you only shared one with us.
That's true.
So we want to know what the second criticism
That's
story
his
is.
criticism of your performance.
No, it's not a criticism even a little bit. It's a, you left me wanting more. That's a very positive thing. But hold on to that because I have a second part. So we want to hear your second story. But the question I have is this. In this culture, especially in the culture of athletics, we live in a keep receipts culture. Mm-hmm. You hear it all the time. I keep receipts. You talk about me, you do something to me, you disrespect me, I keep receipts, and I'm going to get back to you. Well, I want to know from you guys how we can develop a heart that is righteous and looks like Jesus and handles criticism correctly in a culture that teaches us to keep receipts.
I was going to reference his second part, Psalm 103, verses 8 and 12. Psalm 103, verses 8 through 12.
Well, what was it? I'm sorry. Psalm 23?
No.
What was it?
No. We're not talking about comfort. We're talking about criticism. Psalm 103, verses 8 through 12.
I thought the people might want to know. That's why I asked.
Psalm, let me get there, Joe. Got me off my game.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead and read it, Joe.
Psalm 103, 8 through 12. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us.
Obviously, the example is, as the psalmist has written, the Lord's example. And it's easy. You did a great job reading, and it's easy to read, and it's easy to focus on and meditate on. But for us who are in the world and working and going all the time, it may be hard, as Bart talked about, keeping receipts. I always, and I want you to laugh. I'm kind of joking. I've inherited one of the traits from my mother. Something can happen in 1997, and you could be rolling down the road in 2009. And she would just remember it all of a sudden. She could just remember it, and it was just like all over again. You'd relive.
She kept receipts.
She kept receipts before we kept receipts, and that was a tough life. I mean, just could not forget anything. And I have found myself that I hold on to things, what happened October the 12th, 1984. This kid in middle school that, my wife says, you're adults now. You probably don't need to bring that up. Okay. Just don't,
This was 1984.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You remember the exact date?
Well, there's lots of dates, but I struggle with that. But what I need to remember how to deal with keeping receipts and not keeping receipts is to realize that the Lord is merciful and gracious. So should we. He is slow to anger. We should be slow to anger. He abounds in mercy. So should we abound in mercy. He will not keep his anger forever. We should not hold on to our anger. And that's tough for a lot of us to maybe, or I'll speak for myself, that's tough to do sometimes, but we have to do that. We have to try to do that because that's the expectation. Otherwise, I think it's a miserable life if you're all the time keeping receipts and just being burdened and all those things. Does that help a little bit, Bart?
I think some of it depends a little bit on what you mean by keeping receipts. Proverbs 17:10 says, "A rebuke goes deeper into one who has understanding than 100 blows into a fool." I think we want to hang on to legitimate criticisms if they motivate us to get better and to improve ourselves and that sort of thing. If you use it in a positive way. On the other hand, if you're using it like as reasons to hate, somebody else, Proverbs 15 verse 12 says, "A scoffer does not love one who reproves him." So are you using, by keeping the receipts, and this is probably what most people mean when they say that, here's a list of people that
I've got a gas receipt from the other night. I held on to it.
Right, yeah. You've got a list of people that have doubted you, and so you kind of hate them for it, and you want to prove them wrong. That's not a positive thing. Hanging on to the criticisms that may be legitimate, and hey, I'm going to prove this criticism wrong. I'm going to do better than this. What was thought of me. You can use that in a positive way. Does that make sense?
Alan, if you could, can you tell story number 2, like the short version? Because we got questions out here.
All my versions are short, Joe.
Okay.
I'm saying I kind of take that. I internalize that a little bit.
Don't think too much
you
into
keep
it.
Receipts too. I can tell. My one, I actually have 1.5 extra story.
Great. Is this the half one?
No, well, I can give you the half one too.
Oh.
But I forgot. I did have a short memory this time. We did an event here at our congregation once. We went on a little mission trip, and most people have brainstorms. I have brain drizzle, and I had just like a really good brain drizzle. And I thought, you know what, these people are great. I'm going to do another survey like I did back in Lexington a few years ago in Louisville, and they won't respond this way. I don't think.
You didn't learn your lesson.
I didn't. I forgot. I said I had a short memory, and but I talked about how tell us all the great things that we accomplished and what recommendations would you give. Well, like this time I had people who were stapling their recommendations to my cover page. So it went from one page. I was getting packets back from people. I thought, well, probably don't need to do note to self. Please stop doing surveys. And my other criticism is, most of you know that I really like to talk a lot about driving a bus. And
you drive a bus?
I do. Did you hear about it?
I hadn't heard
Come
about
ride
it.
with me. I got pictures too, and I got a song about it too.
I've heard it.
But my trainer, she was the utmost critic. Forever. Skills test, critic. And yet I was trying to believe the best in everybody. I was trying to believe the best in her. I don't think she really hates me. She acts like she does, but I don't believe it. I don't think she really does. So the day before I have to go qualify at the state level to get my license, we're walking out of the bus pen. And it was a rough training session. And I said, "Hey, Shannon," I said, and I was smiling. I said, "You think I'll pass tomorrow?" And she kind of looked off into the distance towards the gray sky. And she said, "You know, Alan, I don't know." She said, "I don't know." So I thought, well, you know, I don't know either. You know, I don't know. We'll just see what happens tomorrow. But,
Really she wasn't giving you false hope.
no, she still doesn't like me. So.
All right. Okay, we got one.
So,
Yeah, we got you.
Daniel, you talked a little bit ago about constructive criticism. Just kind of two things. I've had people say that to me. I want to give you a little constructive criticism, and you'll say, "Okay, well, that's like giving the okay to just bombard you with stuff." You know, so some people, I think, kind of flag what they're going to tell you in a nice way. "Hey, I want to give you some constructive criticism." That's the okay to say whatever you want to say. On back of that, I want to ask you all, have you given constructive criticism to someone, or has someone given you constructive criticism? How did they respond, and how did you respond?
Oh, yeah. One time, I'll praise the way this guy dealt with it. I heard a preacher friend of mine say something in the pulpit, and I felt like he had misused a passage, and not in any kind of malicious way, but I felt like maybe that needed a second look. And so after services, I did walk up to him and I said some positive things about the lesson, but I said, you used this text a couple of times. It might be worth going back and looking at that text more in light of the context and see if it still means what you thought that it meant. And I was nervous about doing that because I'm not a very confrontational person, but he used that passage a lot, and I thought, well, he's going to continue to use it, and it would be better if he understood that a little bit better. But I wanted him to come to the conclusion himself rather than me being like, here's what it means. Well, he went home that afternoon. He came back, and in the evening sermon, he actually said, a brother pointed out something about this passage that I really hadn't thought about before, and I appreciate him loving me enough to share that with me. And it does have different nuance than how I was treating it. I thought he did that very, very well. So I tell that story to praise him and how he responded to that. I guess as criticism, yeah.
But it was your approach doing this out of love too. Mm-hmm. If you would have gone and just Bible thumped him about you're wrong about this, it might not have been as well received. But he knew your motivation in this too wasn't to show how smart you were; it was to help him out.
Right.
So that's been my experience with whenever I've had to give criticism. I'm just thinking about at work, or like I'm a total mediocre 5th and 6th grade basketball coach right now. But I think my kids know that I'm genuinely trying to help them out. And so they're taking my criticism or my coaching. Mm-hmm. Same way with work. If someone's doing something that there's a better way to do it, if I approach that as, hey, I've been in your shoes and man, I can save you like an hour a day by making this small change. They know I'm really trying to help. It's nothing malicious, You like that word? I'm going to use the word. We have any other?
Your maliciousness keeps down the kerfuffle.
Okay.
Am I working?
You're working.
Okay. One thing in my lifetime, but I try to draw stuff from my life experience. There's one Bible verse, one of the golden texts of the Bible. It's more blessed to give than to receive. And we really take that to heart when it comes to criticism, because we like to give it, but we don't like to receive it. But sometimes we have to give criticism. It's part of our job, part of being a parent, part of being a friend, part of being a Christian brother, to give criticism. And one of the things I've learned, and I failed to really take that lesson and do it is you got to do it in the right way. And I think if you have any words of wisdom about how to prepare yourself to give criticism, how to do it in the correct manner, it might be something worth listening to.
Well, as you were talking, one thing that came to my mind is it is all about your motivations. Ask yourself, why are you offering this criticism? And are you doing it to help the person or some less beneficial, beneficent type of motivation? And if you're sincerely trying to help them, then that's going to come across. I think that's going to be sort of natural. You're going to approach them with respect. You're not going to be demeaning and that sort of thing. But it also occurred to me, it's not a direct answer to your question, but a thought I had while you were talking there is that I would 1,000% rather somebody come and criticize me to my face directly, even if it's harsh, even if they're not being kind. I would much rather them come and tell me all the things I'm doing wrong and how dumb and ugly I am and all that sort of thing than I would them talk about me somewhere else. It's not the criticism somebody tells you that gets you. It's the criticism that people are making about you behind your back. So I'll speak for myself. Come to me if you have mean things to say. I can handle somebody being mean to me. What I don't like is somebody being mean to me in the other room. Does that make sense?
I just breathed a sigh of relief when Mark got up there. I thought he was about to lay something down on all three of us. I'm like, whoo, this is it, the end. I always wonder what the end would be like, and this is kind of, I'm about to experience it. To Daniel's point, for me, I don't have any wisdom, but I rely on what James said, the wisdom in James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. That I try to rely on, because I think that's super wise. It's super, like we read a few minutes ago, super easy to read, super easy to hear, but it's hard to apply. But I'm still trying to figure it out. But James chapter 1 verse 19 says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Now, my weaknesses and my frailty have gotten those in verse 19 reversed. I have reversed those, not on purpose, not intentionally, but because I make mistakes. I drop the ball, so to speak, and I deal with sin in my life that I haven't always been swift to hear. I haven't always been slow to speak. Haven't always been slow to wrath. I've gotten those reversed, and that's on me, but it's for me to grow from and learn from. But the wisdom is what we find in Scripture, qualities needed in trial. That's the wisdom in James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, on how to deal with criticism, regardless of someone's motivation.
Okay, we've got time we've got one more. Is there one more after him that would like to go, or is... Okay, we've got time for two more questions, and you know what? We're like breaking. This is a record-breaking night. For one, we've got an audience, which has been kind of neat. We're way over time. This will be our longest episode to date.
Well, when I listen to other podcasts that do live episodes, the live ones are always longer.
Are they?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that we have some audience participants. I'm also glad that nobody's ripped us apart.
Wait a minute, you still got two people
we
left,
have
Joe.
two more.
There's nothing you've...
And the two coming are heavy hitters.
Look at my gray hair. Look at all the mistakes I've made. I'm telling you, it ain't over. You got two people left.
It ain't over. So, okay, we got time for two more. So hit us gently.
So with Daniel, he wisely said he would rather somebody come to him and talk to him and criticize him as opposed to not. And I would agree with that because you're a wise, mature man. But as a parent that's trying to raise children that are not yet as wise and mature, how do we train them up to see the good in the criticism?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. That's your brother.
That's my brother.
Yeah.
It is. I'm proud of him. He's been working hard on that one back there.
Well, I think it's like anything else you teach them. You're teaching them you talk to them about the value of criticism. That is not something that we need to run from and hide from all the time. And criticism doesn't necessarily mean somebody hates us or dislikes us because they're criticizing us. So it's an important life skill to be able to receive criticism. And so you can also model that in the home. You can find ways to, it's kind of brave, I guess, to do, but you ever invite your children to criticize you? You ever ask them?
No, I never.
Yeah.
You do that?
No,
what kind of responses are you getting?
I'm not sure I've directly done that either.
You doing surveys?
This is theoretical here. Yeah, we're doing surveys.
You do surveys too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore.
We're gonna have to talk about this allowance.
You do seek their.
It's not working. We're gonna need. Okay.
Negotiate that.
That's right.
Yeah, there's an Andy Griffith show about that.
Is there?
Yeah.
I remember that.
You remember that one? Yeah, Opie. It didn't work. The negotiation did not work well.
When he threw a fit in the floor.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was a funny episode. Anyway, so modeling it, talking about the value of it, letting you can even discuss in the home criticism that you've received and let them see how you respond to that, what you do with it. And so there's a lot of teaching in the home happens with modeling and what they see us do. They're going to pick up on a lot more than the stuff they hear us say.
Well, did you say, I don't know how everybody else is. Again, that term criticism has this negative connotation to it, doesn't it? But maybe instruction. I instruct / criticize my sons when they're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. Get them back on the right
You
path.
coach them. That's another word you can use.
I coach them, right? And they know the reason I'm doing that, and they respect me. And so, at least most times, they'll take it to heart and realize it. So I think, not letting them just be feral and running amok, if you will, but if you coach them in love, they'll understand that sometimes criticism comes out of love, and that's what you need to be listening to.
Mm-hmm. To Jeremy's point, the only thing I would offer is
time. Are you going to name every one of our?
Yeah. They don't. I'm not going to post his address or anything. Nobody in Zimbabwe.
Be careful, because so far every unwritten rule we've had, Alan's marched right through.
Yeah. Well, you said it's a record-breaking night.
It is.
But to Jeremy's or his question is timing. That's something I've learned is timing. Think about when do you want somebody to talk to you, or when do you want somebody to criticize you? Well, the short answer is never, but the real answer is that, I listen to a hostage negotiator, and he always talks about bringing the emotion down. Anytime you're having a negotiation or confrontation with somebody, an FBI hostage negotiator, but you can take a lot of those same applications and apply them to parenting. I've learned that the hard way too. But timing, you don't want to roll somebody out of bed at 6 a.m. and start talking about grades or those kind. I've done that, and that's a big mistake too. I've broken a lot of those rules, but it's timing. And I've learned if you're talking about children, catch them being good. I'm trying to think like positive coaching, positive, not criticism, but say, hey, you did a great job on this.
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah. So when you have those, you've built up some equity, and you can have those hard conversations.
That's true. That's
those
good.
kind of things. So that's how I've earned. I'm really not 70. I look this way.
Wasn't there some book?
You missed that, Joe. I was trying to.
No. Oh, well, you don't look 70.
Well, I do.
You don't. Actually, you're looking great nowadays. You got your health.
Let's talk about that then.
There's some positive reinforcement.
I'm joking.
Alan's into martial arts and all that, and well, you're doing great.
Well, thanks, Joe.
It's
about time you get 5 years later you said something nice, so appreciate that.
There's a book that talks about like deposits and withdrawals and
no deposit, no return. Love. No. You talking about his needs, her needs?
I don't know. Is that right?
Yeah, making a motion by Dr. Willard J. Harley.
That's what you're talking about. You're putting some positive coins in. That way, if you ever need to, I guess I'm butchering this analogy, but if you ever need to make a withdrawal and give some negative reinforcement, it's okay because you've built up that.
Dr. Willard J. Harley, his needs, her needs.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
It's probably a great book.
But I've been running into red most of my life, so I don't run into black, Joe.
I've heard a lot of sources talk about a compliment sandwich. When you're doing criticism, you start with a compliment, you offer your critique, and then you close with a compliment. But then I also read a leadership book that totally discounted that, said that's a terrible idea because what that does is allows the person to focus on what they wanted to hear rather than what they needed to hear.
Yeah.
And so...
most times when you got a sandwich, nobody cares about the bread, right? It's the stuff in the middle.
Stuff in the middle.
Okay, last question, and we're going to wrap this thing up.
I just had a question about, I've got a friend or an acquaintance who I spend a lot of time with who's constantly criticized, the church and what we believe and why we believe it, and like made fun of me publicly and made jokes and stuff. And then we had a conversation. We've had a couple conversations about, the Bible, and, I've showed him verses about why we believe what we believe. And everything I say, it's always, he tells me why I'm wrong and why he's right and how we take things out of context. And I just didn't know if with the criticism you get to a point where you just say we can't have these conversations anymore, or do you just keep going and try to make sure that, you've at least planted a seed?
Is this someone that, so where are they? Are they religious at all, or?
Yeah, of some other denomination.
I got you. What do you think, boys? I mean, if you're showing them book, chapter, verse, and they're discounting it, they're not discounting you, right? They're turning their back on the truth, and so that's.
I always say, don't give up on that relationship.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on where the person is coming from. You have to exercise some judgment there. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 5, hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Verse 6, where I really wanted to get to. Do not give what is holy to dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you into pieces. The holy nuggets of wisdom that you're sharing are pearls, and if you have somebody that is just completely antagonistic, they're just using you trying to share your faith as a reason to tear you down and tear your faith down and all that sort of thing, they may not be ready to receive that yet. So it may be where you're in a situation that you have to go back to the love and influence mode where you're reaching them through your example, through your love, through trying to influence them, let them see what's different in you from everybody else to begin to open their heart. But if they're not just completely turning and attacking you because of the good things that you're sharing with them, but you think that there is some actual sincerity, some good faith in how they're trying to understand with you, then keep reasoning from the Scripture and just give that time, keep spreading that seed. Does that make sense?
I think we always say we can't save everybody, but you don't give up on anybody, and don't throw that relationship away. But don't be abused, but don't throw it away either.
Okay. Well, then, that's a wrap, guys. We did it. Our first studio audience. We had participation. Worked out great. We also fed on anybody out there that has a podcast. It helps if you give them food.
Yeah,
people
right.
show up. So
spiritual
Daniel,
food and physical food.
Yeah. Some of it was probably pretty good. I
yeah.
don't know. So, Daniel, if you can take us home, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. So we want to thank our live studio audience for being here tonight. We want to thank our dear listener on your podcast app for allowing us to be a part of your spiritual diet. We want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making soul training possible and for the pizza tonight. And on behalf of Alan and Joe, I'm Daniel. Until next time, keep soul training.
Soul Training was recorded before a live studio audience.
Soul Training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got Soul Training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky 42142. That's Soul Training.